Welcome to another episode of Memorable Moments in Topeka History. I'm your host, Harold Gingrich. Well, it always amazes me as I discover new things about Topeka and discover people who, for some reason or another, seem to have just gotten lost in history, and their contributions to society have often been overlooked as well. A great example of that is a young man by the name of Francis Wylton Reichelderfer, which is a strange name for the Topeka community, and yet he had an impact. His father had an impact on this community as well. And it's a blessing to look into men like this who had such a powerful impact on our nation. Francis Reichelderfer was born on Tuesday, August the 6th in 1895 in Harlan, Indiana, to Francis Allen and May Carrington Reichelderfer. His father was a Methodist minister, as was his grandfather on his mother's side. Well, on April the 11th in 1911, at the Methodist Conference of Episcopal Churches, Francis Allen was appointed to serve as the pastor of the Topeka Methodist Church, and we see that church behind us, and he was assigned to serve here as the pastor. Now, we don't know exactly when they moved into town, but what we do know from issues of the Topeka Journal is that one of his first responsibilities was to conduct the funeral for a small child who had died. Not exactly the way you want to begin a new ministry in a new community. But he was here and he served, and he would serve for 2.5 years. Well, we know very little regarding Wylton's high school experience. Now, his first name was Francis, but he went by Wylton. And his name does appear in an April 16th, 1913 commencement announcement in the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. And the Journal-Gazette was reporting on the baccalaureate and the commencement activities here at Topeka High School in that year. The Fort Wayne article read like this: the 17th annual commencement of Topeka High School will be held on April the 14th and 25th at Sycamore Literary Hall. The baccalaureate address will be given next Sunday evening at the Sycamore Literary Hall by Reverend F.A. Reichelderfer, pastor of the M.E. Church. The news went on to list the names of the 14 members of the graduating class. It also reported that on Thursday evening of that week, the 24th of April, the class play would be given. And the play was Silas Marner, with Wylton playing the leading role. Well, as I said, after only 2.5 years, his father's time of ministry here at the church would come to an end following Wylton's graduation. The Topeka Journal, again in September of that year, 1913, reported that Reverend F.A. Reichelderfer, who has been the pastor of the Eden Methodist Church for the past 2.5 years, delivered his farewell sermon Sunday to the church, full of his loyal members. Unfortunately, within a few years, 2 years later in fact, Pastor Reichelderfer would die at the age of 41 from tuberculosis. Well, it was in the fall of 1913 that Wylton attended Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and he went there on a science scholarship. To supplement his income, he worked his way through college, rising early in the morning at 3:30 to stoke furnaces and then to wait on tables in the women's dormitory. In 1917, he graduates with a BS in chemistry and chemical engineering. Following graduation, he enters the U.S. Navy Reserve with the hopes of becoming a pilot. But the Navy had other plans. And it was at ground school that he attended in Massachusetts Institution of Technology, we know today just simply as MIT, that he signed up for courses in aerology. That's meteorology for flyers. And that career path was significant. Instead of being sent to the European theater as he had hoped, Reich, as he became known to his friends, was sent to Nova Scotia, where his job was to brief submarine patrol pilots on weather conditions. By December of that year, the Navy had sent him to Harvard's Blue Hill Meteorology Observatory to study advanced meteorology and to be trained as a weather officer. We learned an interesting thing from his obituary that is out on the Find a Grave website, that he received his commission from the Navy in 1918. The following year, he earned his wings as an aviator. His first post was in Lisbon, Portugal, where in 1919 he provided weather information for the first transatlantic flight made by a Curtiss NC-4. Now, the NC-4 was essentially a flying boat, and the flight took 19 days. 11 years later, Reich would chart the weather maps for Charles Lindbergh's historic flight across the Atlantic Ocean in the spirit of St. Louis. Well, meteorology wasn't the only thing that captured Wylton's heart. So did Miss Beatrice Hoyle, the youngest daughter of a prominent textile engineer, John E. Hoyle of New Bedford, Massachusetts. Now, we don't know how the two met or how they fell in love, but what we do know is that they were married on a Saturday evening, June 19th, 1920, in his mother's home in Harlan, Indiana, by his grandfather, E.C. Carleton. Well, following a honeymoon, they set up housekeeping in Norfolk, Virginia. And it was in those years that followed, while he was at Norfolk, that Wright flew all kinds of aircraft, from dirigibles like the Hindenburg that he rose in, fixed-wing aircraft. I thought it was interesting he even competed as a hot air balloonist. Well, as he studied meteorology, he became dissatisfied with U.S. textbooks, and he was attracted to the idea of treating weather phenomena as physical air masses and frontal movements rather than basing predictions on isobars. So given his meteorology experience and his aviation, in 1922, he was appointed the Chief Navy Aerologist. That's a fancy word for meteorologist. And he would serve in that capacity till 1928. Working from a corner office in the Maine Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C., his primary responsibilities were drawing up weather maps and comparing them to the official forecasts and pondering the weather in general. Within a few short years, he came to be recognized for his value as a meteorologist, but also in the value of it in lighter than air aircraft. And he started pushing for an expansion in that area in the Navy. He was given a new assignment in Lakehurst, New Jersey as the chief meteorologist for lighter than air operations. So that was basically for dirigibles. In effect, he was expanding the Navy's dominance in weather forecasting and aviation. From 1928 to 1931, he served on the USS Los Angeles. The United States had received the dirigible from Germany as a part of war reparations following World War I. As an executive officer at the Lakehurst Naval Air Station in 1936, he acted as an observer on the German airship, the Hindenburg. Fortunately, he was not on board when the Hindenburg crashed and burned on May 6, 1937, killing 13 passengers and 22 crew members. In September of 1938, the head of the U.S. Weather Bureau tragically died of a heart attack. And while the Navy Department had no direct control over the Weather Bureau, the Navy believed that improved weather forecasting would greatly improve both the safety and the effectiveness of aviation, which in turn would be vital in the importance for the United States were they to go to war. So Reich's strong background in aviation and his advancement as a naval officer and an established track record as a forward-thinking scientific aviation meteorologist, put all of that together, he became the prime candidate to fill the vacancy. At the age of 43, having earned his doctorate from Northwestern in 1939, Reich retired from the U.S. Navy after 21 years of military service and assumed the role of director of the U.S. Weather Service. He took that position on December 15th, 1939. And over the next 25 years, he would bring the Weather Service into modern technology era, begin to utilize radar as a part of weather forecasting. And quite frankly, his role and the role of meteorology was critical in the D-Day invasion of June 6, 1944. When Reich retired in 1963, he'd served under Presidents Roosevelt, President Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy, and the honors were numerous. And it was President John F. Kennedy, on the occasion of Reich's retirement, who best described his service. Kennedy said, "You've held the post of Chief Weather Bureau with great distinction under 4 presidents. As the Chief of the Weather Bureau, you presided over the evolution of meteorology, of weather forecasting, taking it from an art to a science." Well, today, the American Meteorology Association still gives an award annually in his honor. His contribution is just indescribable. He brought radar into weather forecasting. He was the one that pushed for weather satellites. And for most of us living in this Topeka area, we knew nothing of him or of his contribution. It's amazing to me as I think about what we take for granted right now. We pull out our smartphone, or if we have an Apple Watch, we're checking the weather, we're going online. All of these things we take for granted. And none of it would have been possible were it not for a young man who once walked the streets of Topeka, Francis Wylton Reichelderfer. An amazing contribution that is really a part of the memorable, significant history of what we call Topeka. Francis Wylton Reichelderfer died on January the 26th, 1983, at the age of 87. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery next to his beloved wife, Beatrice, who had died 10 years earlier. Wylton and Beatrice had one son, Navy Lieutenant Bruce Allen Reichelderfer. On October the 19th, 1985, the nation's primary weather satellite ground station at Wallops Island in Virginia was dedicated in his name and in his memory. Again, today, without so much as a second thought, we open up our weather app on our smartphone or on our computer. We check the weather. We rely on television weather forecasts and the National Weather Service. And we depend on them for life-saving alerts and warning us of threatening weather. We have all of this amazing technology right at our fingertips. It's something that we just take for granted. So the next time that you open up your smart device or you hear the weather forecast, I hope that you'll remember that had it not been for a kid who once roamed the streets of Topeka, none of this would have been possible. And it's sad that up until now, most people have never heard of Francis Wylton Reichelderfer. We owe him such a debt of gratitude. Well, thank you for joining us and for watching. We hope that you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel and that you'll join us again next time when we take another look at a memorable moment in Topeka history.